the ground just moved under Washington, D.C. Stop what you were doing. Because what unfolded in the last 48 hours is a political earthquake.
Yeah.
It reveals a fundamental hypocrisy at the heart of the American legal system.
It's just stunning.
We are watching a simultaneous, self-contradictory legal implosion. A massive political victory for one side, paired with a crushing financial sanction for the other.
Both happening at once.
Think about it. On the very night, the final major 2020 election prosecution collapsed entirely in Georgia. A federal circuit court judge somewhere else leveled a nearly $1 million penalty against the sitting president.
And the language in that ruling was something else.
Aggressive, venomous. It called the president a mastermind of strategic abuse. So how can both things happen at the same time? How did this entire strategy of politically motivated legal action just implode overnight for one side? And what does this judicial action reveal about who is really allowed to use the courts and who is just a target? We are going to uncover the full story of this stunning political and legal paradox. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it. Okay, so we have to start with the sanction, the $1 million sanction, because the language used in the 11th Circuit Court's affirmation is what really shocked legal analysts.
Right. It wasn't just a dry, technical ruling upholding a fine. It felt personal.
Exactly. Read like an emotional attack delivered under judicial letterhead. The affirmation of this nearly $1 million sanction against the president and his attorney, Alina Habba, analysts describe it as partisan, emotionally charged. One even said it read like a CNN monologue stapled to a federal court filing.
And that's an incredible thing for a legal observer to say about a circuit court decision. It's almost unprecedented.
So what's the context here? This came from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. What does that mean for the average person listening?
Well, an appellate court reviews decisions made by lower courts. So for them to not only uphold the fine, but to do it with such aggressive, emotionally charged language, it gives the original sanction a powerful legitimacy. It sends a message across the entire judicial system. It's not just one rogue judge anymore.
A message. And what was the accusation that prompted this message? The one that led to the president being labeled a mastermind of strategic abuse and a prolific and sophisticated litigant.
The sources are really clear on this. The court's core finding was that the president's lawsuit itself was the misconduct.
The lawsuit itself. Not something he did during the lawsuit.
Exactly. Specifically, his use of legal discovery. The original lawsuit, you have to remember, it targeted individuals who were instrumental in the 2016 intelligence actions.
So, the people he calls the architects of the Russia collusion hoax.
Right. People from what the reports are calling the Clinton-Comey Schiff ecosystem. The president was essentially trying to use the civil court process, the rules of discovery, to get access to internal communications, emails, depositions from this group.
So wait, he was attempting to use the court's own rules, discovery, to prove his central political claim.
Yes.
And the court turned around and said the very act of seeking that proof was the transgression.
Precisely. That is where the term strategic abuse comes from.
Yeah.
The court, in its opinion, it didn't argue that the president lied on the stand or that he doctored evidence or defied a direct order to hand something over.
No perjury, no obstruction.
None of that. The legal documents suggest the court felt the discovery requests were just too broad, that they were designed to harass and intended to, quote, burden the courts and the opposition with politically motivated litigation.
So the court declared that trying to challenge this ecosystem, this old order, using the legal tools available to every other citizen, was itself an abusive process worthy of a nearly $1 million penalty.
That's the heart of it. The message is, you can't use our tools against us.
That is an extraordinary double standard when you connect the dots. For years, we saw high-level political figures, federal agencies. They pushed the Russia collusion hoax narrative through court filings, through legal challenges, FISA applications.
Many of which we now know were based on flawed or, some reports say deliberately misleading information.
And what happened to them? Did they face any significant legal or financial penalties?
Zero. Absolutely zero sanctions.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fascinating here. The hypocrisy this highlights within the legal ecosystem is it's stark.
Years of litigation from one side, no problem.
Political narratives spun into court filings, endless procedural maneuvers by those who oppose the president. All of it, fine. No massive financial penalty. But the moment his team uses the exact same legal tools to try and expose the architects of that previous narrative,
The system slams down with a near $1 million fine.
it's a clear message. It says that legal inquiry is tolerated only if it aligns with the old order's political interests. You can sue, sure, but only until you start digging into their narratives, into their people.
And the nature of the sanction, it feels punitive in a political sense, not just financial. This was meant to send a warning shot.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just about a single lawsuit. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ruling is less about correcting some kind of judicial malpractice and more about institutional control. The reports we reviewed suggest the message conveyed by the ruling is unmistakable. Don't ever go after the old order again. The president was punished for using the courts in a way that powerful political entities found inconvenient because it threatened to expose politically sensitive information. It had nothing to do with him committing a substantive crime like perjury.
So this ruling, it basically functions as a barrier, a warning sign establishing the boundaries for what is considered acceptable political litigation.
It's a gatekeeping mechanism, and it's a very expensive one.
Okay, so let's summarize this part. We have the president hit with a massive financial sanction, delivered with incredibly hostile judicial language, specifically for trying to use the court's own tools to hold his political opponents accountable.
A ruling that warns against any future inquiry, yes.
But the timing is the key contradiction, because this aggressive ruling lands on the very same night that the biggest, most aggressive case against him, the one that was supposed to secure his political demise, completely imploded.
It's a kind of legal whiplash. It creates this sense of chaos. You have one branch of the judiciary using maximum force against the president for filing a civil lawsuit.
Well, another branch watches a major criminal prosecution against him just vanish into thin air.
Which brings us to Georgia, the case that so many analysts called the big one.
Right, because of the sweeping RICO charges. Let's set the scene. We're talking about the prosecution in Fulton County, Georgia. It was all about the alleged attempt to overturn the 2020 election results there. And the reports we saw claimed Democrats were absolutely certain this RICO prosecution would finally take the president down.
They thought it was a silver bullet. Because it was a state case, they believed it would bypass any federal immunity claims.
So what happened? How did the silver bullet misfire so badly?
The implosion of the Georgia case is, I think, even more stunning than the sanction. It was a complete political and legal surrender. And the key figure here is Judge Scott McAfee.
McAfee, he was seen as pretty impartial, right? He'd ruled both for and against the prosecution at different times.
Yeah, exactly. He'd shown a lot of judicial independence, and he's the one who dismissed the entire prosecution, top to bottom. Gone.
And the crucial detail here, the thing we have to emphasize, is why he dismissed it. It wasn't because of some dramatic last-minute surprise witness or a new piece of exonerating video.
Correct. The official dismissal, it didn't happen because the defense suddenly presented some explosive new evidence that proved innocence. It happened because of a stunning admission from the state's new lead prosecutor.
An admission of what?
Of legal impossibility. But to understand this, you have to remember the context. The original lead prosecutor, Fani Willis, she had already been, effectively sidelined from the case.
Right, because of her own massive meltdown of professional credibility. There was financial misconduct, conflicts of interest, what a lot of people saw as just political grandstanding.
A total mess. So with Willis out, the new prosecutor, Peter Scandalasis, was forced to confront the harsh legal realities of the case she built. And he stepped forward and basically confessed the truth to the court. He said the case was legally unworkable. And he gave specifics that just floored the legal community. He admitted on the record that the timeline for this complex RUO case was, in his own words, absurd.
Absurd? How long?
He said it would drag on for 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years?
Yes, 8 to 10 years of just pre-trial maneuvering and procedural delays before a jury would even be seated.
Well, that fundamentally changes the nature of what this is. It stops being a search for swift justice, and it becomes a protracted political siege.
That's the exact characterization offered by the legal observers in the reports we reviewed. They argue this timeline admission proved the whole thing was never a viable prosecution designed to deliver justice. It was a political weapon disguised as a courtroom strategy.
Because a case that takes 10 years ensures the target, the president, will be perpetually tied up in litigation. It outlasts the current election cycle, maybe the next two.
It's designed for headlines.
Yeah.
For fundraising, for political theater. It was never built for a practical trial schedule.
But the viability of this entire prosecution As many legal analysts pointed out from the beginning, it depended on one single factor:
It did.
the president not returning to the Oval Office in January 2025.
That is the ultimate confession embedded within this collapse. Once the president returned to the Oval Office, the legal ground shifted dramatically. Every expert knew that Georgia, a state court, could not successfully force a sitting president.
With the constitutional shield of presidential immunity and the massive burdens of the executive branch.
Right. They couldn't force him to endure years and years of pretrial hearings, discovery disputes, depositions. The constitutional conflicts would have been insurmountable.
A sitting president can't just be pulled into a state courtroom for a decade.
It would create an unresolvable constitutional crisis. And the attempt to use this complicated AF US statute, which is designed for, the mob, against a sitting president who could argue he was performing official duties, it was a constitutional time bomb. And no judge, including Judge McAfee, wanted to see that explode in their courtroom.
So the retreat by Scandalassus and the Georgia officials wasn't just a simple legal adjustment. According to these analyses, it was a political surrender.
Absolutely. It was a confession that the case was merely a political fantasy, that it was fundamentally untriable under the new reality of his presidency.
So Fani Willis launched this Ryko circus for headlines and political fame.
And her successor, facing the actual reality of constitutional law and the impossible timeline, was forced to acknowledge the obvious. The case only worked as a political weapon when the president was a private citizen with limited leverage. His return to that constitutional shield meant the case became a liability, a national embarrassment waiting to explode.
So let's just recap this stunning contradiction again. The 11th Circuit Court levies a $1 million fine against the president for using the legal system to challenge his political opponents.
While at the exact same time, the most significant criminal case against him collapses because its entire premise that he wouldn't regain executive power failed.
It really highlights a system in complete internal contradiction.
It shows these massive fault lines. The legal system is applying maximum pressure in one area, civil sanctions, while demonstrating total inability and a lack of confidence in another, criminal prosecution. And this dual pattern, it leads us directly into a broader look at how the system seems to operate when the establishment is the target.
Right. Let's discuss that broader pattern now, because the sanction against the president, one of the largest civil sanctions in modern political history for filing an allegedly aggressive lawsuit, is happening just as criminal cases against the very people who allegedly targeted him. The Comey, Clinton-era operatives, intelligence officials.
All of them are collapsing like dominoes.
And how are they collapsing? Not on the merits, but almost universally through technicalities. It's the ultimate contrast in accountability.
It is the starkest evidence of a two-tiered system, according to the analysts we reviewed. These individuals are not being cleared because a jury found them innocent. They're escaping accountability through procedural errors, through loopholes.
We need to get specific here. What kind of technicality allows a high-profile case to just vanish? Let's take the case involving James Comey, for instance. Why did that case fall apart?
The reports explain that the case against the former FBI director didn't fail because the underlying facts of the case were disproven, his alleged handling of classified material. It fell apart because of a deep constitutional legal issue. It had to do with the appointments clause of the Constitution. The prosecutor appointed to handle the case, a woman named Lindsay Halligan, was ruled by a judge to have been unlawfully installed.
Unlawfully installed.
Yeah.
What does that mean in practical terms? And why does that automatically void an entire prosecution?
It's a profound constitutional issue. It's not just a minor clerical error. The source reports suggest that the Biden-era Department of Justice was allegedly cutting constitutional corners. They were relying on temporary appointments or using internal regulations that skirted the formal constitutional requirement that certain high-level prosecutors must be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, or properly designated under established law.
So they were trying to fast-track things.
Exactly. And when a judge finds an officer is unlawfully appointed, it means that officer lacked the constitutional authority to bring the indictment in the first place. The whole case is void from the start.
No, it's not an issue of guilt or innocence. It's an issue of authority. The DOJ was allegedly rushing to push these cases forward, and they bypassed the correct time-consuming constitutional appointment process.
That's the argument. A bureaucratic misfire, or, as critics suggest, a deliberate shortcut taken to accelerate political prosecution. And once a federal judge, like Judge Cameron Curry, who is cited in these reports, starts rigorously applying the appointments clause,
then those indictments just get tossed.
They have to be tossed, no matter how politically motivated or sensitive. And Judge Curry, according to these reports, issued rulings that the special prosecutors in both the Comey case and the Letitia James case were unlawfully appointed.
Wait, hold on. If the special prosecutors in multiple high-profile cases were ruled unlawfully appointed, that suggests a systemic issue with the DOJ. This isn't a one-off mistake.
It implies that the institutional push to prosecute figures associated with the previous administration was so aggressive that procedural corners were being cut, specifically constitutional corners. And the core critique here is the pattern that emerges from this.
Which is?
When the establishment is the target, the system finds an exit ramp, a constitutional loophole, a procedural quirk, an unlawful appointment that makes the whole case vaporize.
But when the president is the target?
The analysis suggests the system not only tolerates the case, it builds a runway, it smooths the path, it allows the process to continue even when it's based on disputed premises, like we saw with the early stages of the Georgia RFEO case.
This alleged imbalance, where technicalities save the insiders, but they never seem to protect the outsider, that has to be causing massive internal tension within the judiciary. Is this what the analysts are calling a judicial revolt?
That is precisely the term being used. The reports suggest that federal judges across the country and, across the political spectrum are rejecting these shortcuts. They're rejecting the improvisations and the procedural gymnastics that the political legal machine had been relying on for years.
They've had enough.
The judiciary has allegedly reached a breaking point.
Why now? Why are they reaching this breaking point now?
It's a crisis of legitimacy. Judges are signaling that they are no longer willing to sacrifice the judiciary's institutional credibility just to protect the old political order. They're not going to carry the political burden anymore for what many observers see as lawfare dressed up as prosecution.
So they're scrutinizing everything.
They're scrutinizing appointments. They're demanding adherence to the appointments clause. They're making sure that legal theories are not stretched beyond recognition. When the DOJ cuts constitutional corners so aggressively that multiple indictments have to be tossed, the judges are stepping in to enforce the rules.
Even if that enforcement allows politically powerful figures to walk away untouched.
That's the key. The unmistakable message is that the legitimacy of the process matters more than the political outcome, and they will no longer be complicit in politically motivated overreach.
So the very legal structure that the opposition relied on, speed, shortcuts, procedural flexibility, is now being examined by judges who are suddenly demanding constitutional rigor.
The mechanism is turning on itself. It's a critical inversion of power. The implicit trust that the political machine had in the judiciary to just, close ranks and look the other way, that's rapidly deteriorating.
And this forces prosecutors to admit defeat, like in Georgia.
Or it forces federal judges to toss cases built on flawed foundations, like with Judge Curry's rulings. The political machine is losing its procedural shield.
This leads us directly to the figure who allegedly symbolizes this collapsing machinery more than anyone else, Adam Schiff.
Right.
The source narrative positions him not just as a participant, but as a central architect, a protector of the narratives that are now being exposed and legally dismantled.
That's right. Schiff is accused in the reports of a multi-year pattern of protecting liars and of shielding the machinery that depended on that lie all the way back to the 2016 intelligence community actions.
And the allegation isn't just that he was wrong. The claim is that he knowingly amplified falsehoods to advance a specific political outcome.
Which is a very serious charge.
It is. So what specific evidence did the analysts cite for this? How can they claim he knew?
Well, the claim centers on the difference between what he knew from classified briefings versus what he said in his public statements. The narrative suggests that Schiff would sit in these classified settings where he was informed by intelligence professionals that there was no substantive, conclusive evidence of Trump-Russia collusion.
So he was told there was nothing there.
He was told there was no there. Yet, immediately following those high-level briefings, he would allegedly walk out, go straight onto live television, and state unequivocally that he possessed more than circumstantial evidence that the president was compromised.
So he was generating a political and media narrative that he knew from the briefing he just left minutes earlier was false.
That's the allegation, that his function was to translate non-evidence into political ammunition, and in doing so, provide cover for the intelligence community operations he was protecting.
And this pattern, we are told, wasn't a one-off mistake. It allegedly extended into defending the very tools used to pursue the Russia investigation.
Exactly. The source material enumerates specific actions he allegedly took to protect the system. He reportedly defended FISA abuses when it was revealed that warrants were obtained using the Steele dossier.
Which we now know is politically motivated opposition research.
Right. He allegedly excused falsified emails related to the investigation. And when the Inspector General reports came out, contradicting his public claims and detailing FBI misconduct, he allegedly just pretended that they never existed. He chose to double down on the political narrative instead.
So his strategy was just to rely on the political and media echo chamber to repeat his claims, shielding the operatives behind the scenes. How does his position change now in 2025 with this judicial revolt and the collapse of these cases?
The sources suggest he is facing a moment of significant panic because the old shield that he relied upon, the unified, unquestioning cooperation of the judiciary and the media, is gone. The analysis states that he's currently running cover for yet another set of figures tied to the original Russiagate architecture, individuals whose careers are now imploding under this new judicial scrutiny.
What's his strategy now that the system isn't cooperating anymore?
His strategy, according to the source material, it remains consistent. He's trying to position himself as the protector of national security, declare that all these investigations into his allies are just politically motivated revenge.
The weaponization of government argument.
Exactly. And he's hoping that the press will simply parrot his warnings. But here is the massive shift. The judiciary isn't playing along anymore.
They're not just dismissing cases.
No, they're exposing misconduct. They're questioning the underlying narratives. They're writing rulings that directly contradict Schiff's public claims. They are revisiting old assumptions about the legal and procedural foundations of the entire Russiagate operation.
So the very people Schiff is trying to shelter are now legal and political liabilities that the courts are actively refusing to carry.
Precisely. The entire edifice he built his career on, which was based on the premise that the courts and procedural technicalities would always protect the intelligence community's operations, is now under existential threat from within the legal system itself.
And that is the ultimate threat to the old order.
It is. If this trend of judicial rigor continues, if judges keep overturning politically motivated cases, if prosecutors keep admitting their cases are unworkable, and if investigators get full visibility into how the intelligence community operated in 2016,
then the truth that Schiff allegedly spent years burying will come straight to the surface.
and he'll go from being the protector to being the headline. The power dynamics have completely inverted.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis. The unavoidable conclusion you have to draw from these simultaneous contradictory events, the existence of a two-tiered system of justice that is now being exposed under pressure.
The double standard, according to the legal reports we have analyzed, is now undeniable. We have witnessed, in the span of just 48 hours, the starkest illustration of this system you could possibly imagine.
On one hand,
You have the president, the outsider, the target, being financially gutted by a hostile federal circuit court. Sanctioned nearly $1 million for simply filing a lawsuit and seeking discovery.
punished not for hiding evidence or lying, but for seeking to penetrate politically sensitive areas. It's an act of institutional control.
And on the other hand, you have the insiders, the people who allegedly misled judges via flawed FISA warrants, who fed false intelligence to the FBI, who constructed the narratives that dominated media cycles for years.
They walk away untouched.
They escape through procedural technicalities. They slide out through constitutional loopholes like the unlawfully appointed prosecutor findings. They are rescued by procedural quirks that the media often magically spins as integrity instead of privilege. When you look at the two outcomes side by side, the source material argues that this is not justice. It is the strategic management of political liability.
Let's delve deeper into why this collapse happened so spectacularly right now. Why did this particular wave of lawfare fail?
The answer offered by the analysts we consulted is remarkably clear. Lawfare as a political tactic only worked when the president was static.
Static, meaning a private citizen.
Exactly. It was only viable when he was a private citizen with no executive authority, no control over the DOJ, and no constitutional shield like presidential immunity. Lawfare relies on procedural asymmetry. The prosecutors could move quickly, cut corners, and rely on the legal inertia of the state and federal system to perpetually bog down a private citizen.
They could assume constitutional questions, like immunity, would never really be tested because they believed the political outcome preventing his return to power would be secured first.
That was the whole bet.
But the moment he returned to the Oval Office in January 2025, that entire premise just evaporated.
Completely. The source material stresses that his return meant their shortcuts would be reviewed with executive authority. Their misconduct could be exposed by a now hostile executive branch. Their politically motivated decisions could be revisited under the full weight of constitutional challenges.
And that realization triggered panic.
Immediate and highly visible panic. It manifested in the abrupt withdrawals, like the stunning admission in Georgia that the case was unworkable. It manifested in the procedural retreats, where the DOJ found that their corner-cutting meant judges had no choice but to dismiss the indictments.
So this sudden reevaluation of cases that were once claimed to be airtight, it signals overwhelming fear of exposure, not confidence in the evidence.
That is the critical distinction. The legal warfare didn't end because the opposition succeeded on the merits. It ended because, according to this analysis, the president won the political battle first. His return meant that the tactics used against him would finally face constitutional daylight and procedural scrutiny, rather than operating in the shadow of institutional cooperation.
So the system is exposed, not just for his double standards, but for the artificiality and the political motivation of his prosecutions.
The analysis concludes that justice was not blind. It was curated, managed, and redirected. It was a political mechanism designed to achieve a specific outcome, preventing a return to power.
And when that primary outcome failed, the foundation of the entire legal mechanism just buckled.
It buckled under the sheer weight of its own internal contradictions. We are witnessing the moment where the rules of the game are being revealed, because the managers of those rules were the first to break them.
So the country is watching a system that prided itself on neutrality, now standing fully revealed. 2 sets of rules, 2 sets of standards, and 2 sets of outcomes. This moment is not the end of lawfare, but the exposure of it. It's revealing the systemic fractures created by years of political maneuvering masquerading as legal process.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to our listeners.
That's all for this deep dive. But it leaves us with one haunting question. If the guardians of the rules are the first to break them, who is left to protect the game?